Sometimes the most chilling crimes don't happen in darkness. They happen in the glow of ordinary homes, behind smiles, behind promises, behind the illusion of love. She was Sheylla Cabrera, a 33-year-old mother of 3 who came to America chasing a dream: safety, freedom, and a better future for her children. Instead, that dream ended on a quiet street in Lancaster, California, wrapped in silence and betrayal, because the man who vowed to protect her became the reason she never came home. This is not just another case of domestic tragedy, it's a story of control, fear, and a woman who tried to escape before it was too late. Doorbell footage captured the unthinkable: a man dragging something heavy across the driveway at 4 a.m., struggling under the weight, glancing around as if haunted by his own reflection. Inside that bundle was Sheylla. In the days that followed, her disappearance would trigger a desperate search, one that crossed borders, uncovered hidden abuse, and exposed how far a man would go to destroy the woman who no longer feared him. Tonight, we uncover the heartbreaking case of Sheylla Cabrera, a mother, a survivor, and a warning of what happens when love turns into obsession. This is dark justice. Before the tragedy, before the headlines, there was just Sheylla, a woman full of life, kindness, and quiet strength. Sheylla Cabrera was born and raised in Peru, a place where dreams often live in the distance and the United States is the horizon people chase. At 33 years old, she had built what looked like the beginning of a beautiful life. She had 3 young sons, ages 9, 6, and 4, and a home in Lancaster, California. Friends say she was the kind of mother who never stopped moving, always working, always smiling. She would go from her job straight to school pickups, then home to cook for her children. She loved those boys more than anything, one of her close friends told reporters. Everything she did was for them. But even as she smiled for photos and attended school events, something behind her eyes seemed tired. In her circle of friends, whispers began to spread that Sheylla was struggling in her marriage to Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo, a man she'd once loved deeply, but who had grown controlling, possessive. Still, Sheylla tried to hold her family together. She wanted to believe that love could fix everything, that time and faith could bring peace back into their home. But love alone couldn't heal the bruises that don't show on the skin. Friends noticed how Sheylla's social media posts grew more reserved. Her laughter seemed forced. The glow in her face, once full of warmth, began to fade. She wanted out. She wanted to start over. According to people close to her, Sheylla had talked about leaving, about reporting Jossimar for abuse. She told a friend she was scared, but she couldn't live like that anymore. Those conversations now sound like cries for help, calls that went unanswered. In early August 2025, Sheylla began preparing to leave. She wanted safety. She wanted freedom. She wanted her boys to grow up in peace. But freedom for Sheylla would come at a terrible cost. On the evening of August 11th, neighbors saw her coming home with her children. She looked calm, maybe even hopeful. It would be the last time anyone saw her alive. By the next morning, she was gone. When Sheylla's friends couldn't reach her, they began to worry. She never disappeared without a word, never ignored messages about her kids. They called, they texted, no answer. Finally, one of her friends decided to visit the apartment. The blinds were drawn. Her car was missing. Her phone was off. They contacted the police. That's when investigators pulled surveillance footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera. What they found left even seasoned detectives frozen. The footage, time-stamped around 4 a.m., showed a man dragging a large object wrapped in a sheet or blanket across the sidewalk, struggling under its weight. He paused, adjusted his grip, and continued pulling it toward a parked vehicle. The shape inside the fabric was unmistakable. Police later confirmed the man was Sheylla's husband, Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo, and that object was his wife. That moment, captured silently in grainy black and white, was the last trace of Sheylla alive. As investigators began piecing together the hours that followed, a chilling timeline emerged, one that would take them deep into the mountains north of Los Angeles, to the heart of the Angeles National Forest. But before we get there, we have to understand the darkness brewing behind closed doors, a pattern too familiar, too often ignored. because Sheylla Cabrera's story didn't start with violence. It started with love, and it ended with betrayal. Every tragic story begins with a moment of hope. For Sheylla Cabrera, that moment was the day she met Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo. He was charming, confident, and full of promises. Together, they dreamed of a new life in the United States, a place where their children could grow up free from struggle. And for a while, that dream seemed real. They built a home, raised their sons, and worked hard to make ends meet. Sheylla believed they were building something beautiful. But slowly, love began to twist into something darker. The man who once adored her started watching her every move. He wanted to know where she was, who she talked to, and how long she would be gone. At first, Sheylla told herself it was love, that he was just protective. But soon, protection turned into control. The texts, the questions, the anger, they never stopped. Love doesn't feel like fear, yet that's what her life became. Friends began to notice the changes. She stopped coming to gatherings. Her laughter faded. The bright, smiling woman from Peru became quiet, careful, and withdrawn. People who knew her say she looked like someone carrying a secret she couldn't tell. A neighbor recalled hearing arguments behind closed doors, angry voices that would suddenly fall into silence. That silence spoke louder than any scream. At work, Sheylla wore long sleeves even in the summer. When asked about the marks on her arms, she'd smile and say it was nothing, maybe a work accident, maybe a fall. But her co-workers knew. They could see it in her trembling hands, in the way she jumped at sudden noises. She was living in fear, trapped between love and survival. Still, Sheylla tried to keep going. She worked long hours, came home to her children, and pretended everything was fine. Because for her, those 3 little boys were everything. They were her reason to keep fighting, even when her spirit was breaking. Eventually, she confided in a close friend that she wanted to leave. She was saving money, secretly planning to move out with the children. But she was scared of what he might do if he found out. She said she needed just a little more time, a little more courage. In early August 2025, her messages became distant, her replies shorter. On August 10th, one friend texted her, "Are you okay?" Sheylla answered with just 2 words, "Not safe." No one knew what that meant at the time. 2 days later, she was gone. Police believe the confrontation happened in the early hours of August 12th. An argument, a struggle, then silence. No one heard a scream. No one saw what happened inside that apartment. But by dawn, Sheylla Cabrera had vanished. When detectives began searching, they discovered something chilling. A neighbor's doorbell camera had captured Jossimar outside around 4 in the morning. In the grainy black and white footage, he could be seen dragging something heavy, wrapped in fabric across the pavement, struggling under the weight. He paused, adjusted his grip, then continued toward a parked car. There was no sound, no words. Just the slow scrape of fabric against concrete, and the image of a man disposing of a secret he could no longer hide. By the time police arrived, both Jossimar and the children were gone. Sheylla's phone was off, her car missing. To investigators, it no longer looked like a disappearance, it looked like a cover-up. The footage told them what words could not. Something terrible had happened. Detectives began tracing his movements, searching for any sign of Sheylla. They followed credit card records, phone pings, and security footage from gas stations and highways. Each clue led them farther from Lancaster, out of the city, and toward the wilderness of the Angeles National Forest. For those who loved Sheylla, every passing hour was agony. They prayed for her return, even as they feared the worst. She was a woman who crossed continents for her children, who worked every day for a better life. She deserved safety, peace, and love, but instead, she found betrayal inside her own home. The investigation was only beginning, and the search would soon uncover the truth no one wanted to face, because the forest held more than silence. It held the answers and the horror of what really happened to Sheylla Cabrera. The morning of August 12th began like any other in Lancaster, California. Quiet streets, children heading to school, the hum of normal life. But inside one apartment, something was terribly wrong. Sheylla Cabrera was missing. No one had seen her since the night before. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Messages from her friends remained unread, and her car, a silver SUV, was gone. At first, her friends hoped she had simply gone away for a few days to clear her mind. But deep down, they knew Sheylla wouldn't leave her children. Something had happened. By the afternoon, Sheylla was officially reported missing. Detectives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department began canvassing the neighborhood, asking questions, collecting surveillance footage. It didn't take long before they found the image that would break the case open. A doorbell camera across the street showed her husband, Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo, outside around 4 a.m. He was dragging a long, heavy object wrapped tightly in a sheet or blanket. In the footage, he struggled with the weight, stopping midway to adjust his grip. He then loaded the object into the back of a vehicle and drove away into the darkness. The neighbors who saw the footage said they couldn't believe what they were watching. They had seen the couple walking hand in hand with their kids before, smiling, laughing. Now, that same husband appeared to be disposing of his wife's body under the cover of night. Police immediately issued a bolo a "be on the lookout" alert for Sheylla's vehicle. But Jossimar had vanished. So had the couple's 3 young sons. Detectives began to retrace his steps, using cell tower data, highway cameras, and gas station receipts. The trail led them north, away from Lancaster, toward the rugged terrain of the Angeles National Forest, a vast, remote wilderness stretching across the San Gabriel Mountains. It was the kind of place where secrets could disappear forever. For 4 days, search teams combed through winding roads, ravines, and wooded slopes. Then, on August 16th, a search helicopter spotted something unusual near a steep embankment off Highway 39. Deputies hiked down the slope, through brush and loose dirt, and there, beneath a tattered sheet, they found what they were looking for and what they had feared all along. It was Sheylla. Her body was wrapped in the same type of fabric seen in the surveillance footage. The evidence was unmistakable. The woman who had crossed continents for a better life had been abandoned in the wilderness by the man who once vowed to protect her. For investigators, the case had turned from a desperate search into a homicide. For the community, it was heartbreak. News of the discovery spread quickly across Lancaster and beyond. People who knew Sheylla couldn't believe it. Her friends gathered outside her apartment, lighting candles, leaving flowers, praying that justice would come. Many of them had seen the warning signs, the arguments, the bruises, the fear, but they never imagined it would end like this. Detectives confirmed that Jossimar had fled the country, taking the children with him. They believed he was heading to Peru, Sheylla's homeland, using his dual nationality to escape prosecution. Within days, an international manhunt was underway. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office filed charges of murder against Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo and issued an extradition request through Interpol. Authorities in Peru were alerted to be on the lookout for the suspect and the missing children. Back in California, investigators pieced together the timeline. Sheylla had argued with her husband late that night. Sometime after, he killed her, though how, investigators have not yet said. He wrapped her in bedding from their home, carried her to his car, and drove deep into the mountains to dispose of her body. He then took their children and fled. For days, the case dominated headlines across the state. People asked how a mother of 3 could vanish without anyone stopping it. How a man could commit such a crime and then calmly disappear with his children. Friends described Sheylla as a light in every room, a devoted mother, a woman who never gave up. Her story struck a painful chord, not just because of what happened to her, but because of how often it happens to women like her. Women who endure abuse in silence, hoping it will get better. Women who stay because they love. In the Angeles National Forest, a simple white cross now stands where Sheylla was found. Visitors often leave flowers, letters, and small toys, a reminder that behind every statistic, there's a family shattered forever. The search for her husband would soon reach across borders, igniting one of the most emotional manhunts of the year. But no matter how far he ran, one truth would remain. He couldn't escape what he did. When investigators confirmed that Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo had fled the United States, the case took on a new urgency. He wasn't just a husband suspected of murder, he was now an international fugitive. Using his Peruvian passport, Jossimar boarded a flight from Los Angeles to Lima just days after Shella's body was discovered. He took their 3 sons with him, aged 9, 6, and 4. For the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, that detail was devastating. 3 innocent children, now caught in the middle of a nightmare. Detectives worked with Interpol to issue a red notice, effectively alerting law enforcement agencies across the world to detain him on sight. The US Embassy in Peru was notified, and local authorities began tracking his movements through immigration records and witness reports. Meanwhile, back in Lancaster, Shella's friends and family were pleading for help online, posting videos, sharing photos, and demanding justice under the hashtag #Justice for Sheylla. The case gained international attention. News outlets in both the United States and Peru began covering the story of the young mother who had escaped abuse only to lose her life to it. In Lima, authorities traced Jossimar to the Los Olivos district, a crowded neighborhood where he was reportedly hiding out with relatives. Neighbors claimed they saw him coming and going, often carrying one of his children, always looking over his shoulder. He told people he was visiting family, but those who knew him said he looked nervous, paranoid, as if waiting for a knock on the door that could end everything. That knock came on August 25, 2024. Just 9 days after Shella's body was discovered. Peruvian police, working alongside US investigators, surrounded the small apartment where he was staying. When officers entered, they found the 3 boys safe, frightened, but unharmed, and in the corner of the room, Jossimar Cabrera sat motionless, staring at the floor, his passport and a small stack of Peruvian soles beside him. He didn't resist arrest. He simply whispered, "I just wanted to go home." The arrest was recorded on video and quickly spread across news outlets. In the footage, the contrast was haunting the man once seen dragging his wife's body on camera, now being dragged away in handcuffs. Within hours, US authorities confirmed the news. The district attorney's office released a statement. "We are working closely with Peruvian officials to ensure that Mr. Cabrera faces justice for the murder of Sheylla Cabrera. Our priority remains the safety and well-being of the children." Shella's family in the United States was relieved, but the pain was far from over. Her mother, speaking through tears, told reporters, "We will never have Sheylla back, but we want her story to help others so that no woman feels trapped the way she did." The extradition process began soon after. Although Peru does not automatically extradite its citizens, the case's international attention combined with the evidence and the involvement of US diplomatic channels made it likely that he would eventually be returned to California to stand trial. As the legal process moved forward, the children were placed under protective care, their futures uncertain. Some family members in Peru requested custody, while others pushed for them to return to the US. Through all of it, the image of Sheylla smiling in photos, holding her children close, became a symbol of strength and tragedy. The court filings in Los Angeles detailed the horror. Shella's death was ruled a homicide caused by blunt force trauma. The timeline matched perfectly with the doorbell camera footage, the missing sheets, and the digital evidence from his phone. There was no doubt it was premeditated. But beyond the courtroom, the story carried a larger message about the silent epidemic of domestic violence and how often it ends in tragedy. Experts who followed the case said Sheylla's murder highlighted the dangerous intersection of control, isolation, and fear that traps so many victims. She tried to leave, and that's often when abusers become most dangerous. When Jossimar Cabrera was finally led out of the Peruvian courthouse in handcuffs, reporters shouted questions, flashes from cameras illuminating his face. He stayed silent, but his silence said everything. For Sheylla's friends, justice meant more than a prison sentence. It meant telling her story so that her name wouldn't be lost among headlines, so that her courage to seek a better life would not be forgotten. Back in Lancaster, a vigil was held at sunset. Dozens gathered, candles flickering in the wind, as a friend read a message written by Sheylla years before. "I came to this country to build a life filled with love and safety for my children. I want them to grow up knowing they can be anything." The crowd stood in silence, tears reflecting candlelight. Because even in death, Sheylla Cabrera's voice still reached across borders, a reminder that behind every tragic story is a human being who just wanted peace. When the manhunt ended, the cameras turned away. But for those who loved Sheylla Cabrera, the story was far from over. In the quiet corners of Lancaster, reminders of her life lingered everywhere: the apartment she decorated with family photos, the playground where her children used to laugh, the co-workers who still expected her to walk through the office door with that easy smile. Her friends said the silence felt heavier than grief. It was the sound of disbelief, of a tragedy that shouldn't have happened, because Sheylla had been trying to rebuild, to start again. And in the end, that hope was what cost her life. The case drew attention from across the US and South America, not just because of the brutality, but because it revealed something painfully familiar, a pattern that plays out behind closed doors in homes that look perfect from the outside. Love turns to fear, control becomes isolation, and one night, everything ends. After his arrest, Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo was held under guarded custody in Lima while legal teams from both countries worked on his extradition. He was charged with first-degree murder and child abduction. Prosecutors called it a crime of cowardice, an act meant to silence a woman who had finally found her voice. Inside the courtroom, Sheylla's mother sat through every hearing, clutching a photo of her daughter and whispering prayers for her grandchildren. When the judge read the charges, she didn't look at Jossimar. She said later, "He's already living with what he did. That's punishment enough." The children were eventually reunited with relatives, surrounded by people who promised to keep Sheylla's memory alive, not through sadness, but through stories of her strength. Her eldest son, just 9 years old, told reporters quietly, "My mum was brave. She always said everything will be okay." That single sentence became the heartbeat of the movement that followed. Local groups began organizing domestic violence awareness events under her name. At one candlelight vigil, a friend of Sheylla said, "We're not just here to mourn her. We're here to fight for the women still trapped, still scared, still hoping someone will believe them." Across social media, thousands shared her story, not for shock, but for solidarity. They turned tragedy into a voice for change, because what happened to Sheylla wasn't an isolated act of evil, it was the result of a system that too often fails to protect. As weeks turned to months, the forest where her body was found became a place of quiet remembrance. Strangers began leaving notes there, small slips of paper tucked under stones or tied to branches. "You deserved better. Your story reached me. We will not forget you." And for those who tell stories like this, the journalists, the investigators, and yes, even us, Sheylla's case serves as a mirror. A reminder that true crime isn't about death. It's about life, the one that was stolen, and the ones left behind trying to make sense of it. In the final court update, prosecutors reaffirmed their commitment to bringing Jossimar back to California to stand trial. But for Sheylla's family, justice is no longer just about a verdict. It's about ensuring her name stands for something greater, a warning, a light, a promise. Because when one woman's story is told, another might be saved. This is Nora, and you've been watching Dark Justice. If you or someone you know is trapped in silence, reach out. Because silence is where monsters thrive, and stories like Sheylla's remind us, speaking out isn't weakness, it's survivor,